Today we cover why you will lose all of your homestead animals. Welcome back to the Abundant Harvest Homestead. I'm Papa Pepper, and I'll tell you what, the more you get used, almost lost my camera to the wind there, but the more you learn to pay attention in this world, the more you learn from history, the more you check out and kind of understand that a lot of people don't have things planned for your good, the more you realize how fragile of a system a lot of us have either been born into or been kind of duped into participating in. And I'll tell you what, I believe that there is a way a lot of people are going to lose all of their animals, their homestead animals, stuff for meat, for milk, for eggs, and just like that, it could all be taken from you. Some of the things I'm gonna say you might not fully get right away, but I'll try to explain myself, and even if it sounds crazy when I first say it, at least listen for a minute. At least consider and think about the things I say, because it might help you a lot. The way I see it, there's an attack on your self-sufficiency and on your independence. If there wasn't, we wouldn't see things like certain laws that restrict what you can and can't do. We wouldn't see things like, that's an attack on your freedom. We wouldn't see things like the current monetary system in general, and then also the inflation we're dealing with, that's an attack on your wallet. I say wallet, not bank account, because I'd take a wallet, 10 to 1 over a bank account any day. I have my reasons for saying that too, You see that guy there? I recently got a comment about my sheep, rams particularly, and dealing with aggressiveness and stuff like that. And I'm actually gonna do a video just kind of talking about having dominance over your animals where they respect you as being above you. That way when I'm doing this, and I got four-horned rams here, they're not smacking me in the back of the legs and knocking me over, things like that. But I encourage people to try to live more wisely. I encourage people to get more self-sufficient. I encourage people to, get into homesteading. Get into planting a garden, but then learn how to save your own seeds and be able to do it again and again. I mentioned in a video last year about not being able to buy seeds some places. And somebody, I said in the future you might not be able to buy seeds. And somebody shows up and goes, oh, that's just so crazy to think, well, yeah, not going to be able to buy seeds. What's this guy thinking? And I'm like, weren't you paying attention? in 2020, because there was places where it was illegal. You couldn't walk into a store. They would have seeds there, but you couldn't buy them. They were non-essential, so they were off limits. Probably in our entire lifetime, that's the only time that's happened, but if it happened once now, the probability of it happening again, that's pretty good. Same thing with these. The reason I'm putting this video out is maybe you're used to homesteading the way it's always been, where a lot of things in society and the world we live in are working pretty good. Don't get too comfortable because things are starting to work less good. And you too, even if you've got years and years and years of experience with poultry and cows and sheep and stuff like that, you might lose them all in the near future. So I share this for those. I share this for those who are just getting into it now. Learn, but I'm going to share some things to learn, I think, the right way. And to have some things in your mind that are going to help you if a couple things change. Because it's not just like, yay, I got some animals to be more self-sufficient for a year and a half. And now I'm done and I got to go back to the supermarket to buy all my milk, all my eggs, and all my meat. See how that's not the goal, to take a year and a half break so that you can say, oh, I was more self-sufficient once. And then I share that for those who are kind of inspired to consider too, because I think there's a lot of things you can do that are going to waste time and finances and set you up for failure if things head too far in this direction. So let's go start with the poultry, and I'll share some stuff about them with you, and then we'll work through some larger animals too. So what are some ways that you could have poultry and wind up losing them in the near future? Apparently the guineas are going to be a little loud right now. It is what it is. I don't mind the sound. Hopefully you guys can listen through it. But we've got guineas, we've got chickens, we've got ducks, we've got a couple turkeys. We still have one random quail, just because it hatched out. One of the first things I would mention to think about is think about the supply chain. There are things that people do intentionally to disrupt stuff. There's things they do intentionally to reduce the supply, to increase the demand and drive up prices. I know people who've gotten paid not to raise chickens, people who've gotten paid not to farm. It happens. What happens if the supply chain goes down? What if the shipments of trucks and trains are no longer moving? What happens if a bunch of people lose a bunch of employees and factories have to shut down? What happens if you can't go to your local feed store and pick up chicken feed? How long are your chickens going to last? If they live somewhere that they don't have access to any sort of free ranging, to eating like, bugs, grass, weeds, other things, how long are they going to last before you run out of all of your chickens? That's something to consider. You probably want to do some things to at least supplement their feed. It's more cost effective. I think you get a more well-rounded, robust bird out of it. They're more chickeny as far as the actual chicken, rather than like the domesticated, completely sufficient upon you or completely reliant upon you type thing. That's a good idea in my mind. Also, for us, chickens replaced kind of where pigs were in a lot of ways. We stopped eating pigs years ago, and we thought, oh no, because they were kind of like a living garbage disposal. Well, chickens can do the same thing. Our chickens eat all sorts of stuff that the pigs would have. And a lot of garden scraps, straight from the garden. A lot of kitchen scraps, straight from the kitchen. Carcasses, when I go fishing, I can toss what I'm not going to eat after I fillet them and take the meat off in here, and they'll peck them clean. They love that stuff. Then I still have bones I can use in the garden. I also make fish emulsion out of some of the filleted fish carcasses, but they love that. If I harvest a deer or a sheep, they love pecking the skeletons clean, whatever I'm not using. Sheep and stuff, we generally make bone broth. But with the chronic wasting disease, they say you shouldn't with the deer, so we let them peck the carcasses clean. They love that. You know, it's something that's not chicken feed that they're able to eat. Even our young chicks that I had in one of the most recent videos that we let hatch out. You know, I was talking about having hardier animals on your homestead. We hatched them out in January. Most of their life has been snow and freezing temps and really cold stuff. They don't eat much feed at all. They do a lot of free ranging, and we let them. We're okay with that. When I think about feeding regular stuff to them, we have rabbits, which we don't eat anymore, but we have rabbits that we still have for manure, and we still print more rabbits, and people still like to buy them for pets or for manure production. We had them with a reel mower, so a little walk behind, spins a little blade, and then it had a catch. So no gas, no electricity, just push that around. The grass flies into the trap there, and we were getting up to about 50 to 75% yard waste. Or when I would mow portions of the property, I would add that to their pens, and they would eat that with the rabbit feed. And we were about 50 to 75%. If you try going in all in at once, a lot of times they'll get scours, they'll get sick, and they'll die. So if your plan is to wait till the supply chain, you know, is disrupted and then switch over 100% to something they never tried before, a lot of your animals are probably gonna die. Besides just starving to death from not having the feed, you feed them some feed they're not used to, next thing you know they got diarrhea and they're dead. Truth be told, I'm using feed to keep them a little bit quieter behind me. The mixed multitude, the guineas, the ducks, turkeys, chickens, but it's not the only thing that we feed them, and it's not just for cost effectiveness, it's with some foresight, it's with some planning. Listen, if things never get horribly bad, and for the duration of my entire life I can always go to the feed store and pick up feed at a reasonable price, that's another thing. Watch it with inflation. How many hours of your life are you gonna trade? Whoa. Just to buy a bag of feed for your animals. Think about that. But I also, you know, even if things never go bad, the birds are going to be happier because of it. My cost of living is going to be decreased because of it if they're eating other things that I don't have to purchase. That's good. That works out well for me. With having chickens, a couple different things. Number one, try to have a rooster. And if you're going to try to have a rooster, try to have 2 roosters. Sometimes 1 is none and 2 is 1. So if you don't have a backup and you lose your first, you've got nothing. Have a rooster. That way your chickens can be getting bred. Even if you never hatch out a chick, you can still eat fertilized eggs. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're collecting them on a daily or bi-daily basis, they don't start incubating. You're not going to be eating baby chickens. You're just going to eat eggs that happen to be fertilized. Nothing wrong with that. And they taste the same. They're fine. But then, if at some point you can't get more chickens, you can start printing your own. A lot of roosters do really good at defending the hens too. A lot of them you'll see they'll come over, they'll find something to eat, and they'll call the female over and they'll let the female come eat. That's a good rooster. They're good protection for your hens, and it gives you the chance to have a next generation if you need it. Here, we like printing our own. Of course, the joy of new life is just cool, seeing little babies, but it gives us the next generation for free where we don't have to buy chicks or chickens from somebody else. And if you're gonna be having fertilized eggs, which I suggest you do, have chickens that can go broody. Now this can happen one of 2 ways. Either one, have a breed that you're eating the eggs from that can also sit on the eggs if you don't take them away and hatch out chicks for you. If you get dependent upon an incubator because you have electricity and things get disrupted, it's not going to be good for you. You won't have any more chicks because you won't be able to run your incubator. You're not going to keep a generator, you know, going just to power an incubator. And if you're solar, you know, and your opportunity as time goes on, say there's a long-term power outage, to get replacement parts, replacement batteries, you know, that may not be the best either. It's so much easier, and you get more of an ROI because you have less invested, so the return is better to let the chickens do it themselves. And if you have a breed that does not go broody, have a couple hens of some kind that is known to go broody. So have your main flock, you know, and your ones that you really like because they're fast growing or they're, you know, highest egg production or something like that, but have a couple extra hens around from a type that'll go broody if that type won't. That way, if you ever need to, you can hatch out your next generation. You know, otherwise you have chickens once, and then they're either starved to death or you eat them all, and you never have chickens again without having chicks. You got to be able to produce chicks to get to that next generation. That's kind of some of my thoughts about chickens, guys. If you're gonna have chickens, let them have something other than feed. Have a couple of roosters of whatever breed you're trying to breed, and if they're not a broody breed, have a chicken that will sit on the eggs. 2 of them. That way if one dies, you still have one. Do that now while it's cheap and easy, and then if it becomes, you know, expensive and not easy, you'll be set up for the future. Got some rams coming down the hill behind me now as I switch to talking about things like sheep and goats. I'm talking about kind of your mid-sized homestead animals. There's a reason I like guys like this, they'll be up here in a minute, over just having a bunch of cows. I'll get into that as I switch into larger animals. But for sheep and goats, a lot of people use feed of some sort at some point. If they've got meat goats or something that they're just trying to bulk up, a lot of times people put a lot of stuff in them. And my thought would be the same thing with the chickens. If they're going to be that dependent upon feed, you might want to be careful, because if your source ever gets cut off, if your supply ever gets cut off, you're not going to be able to do that very well, and you're going to either have to eat them all or watch them all die slowly, or try to completely change their diet, which can be hard on their digestive system and their body. Even with hay and things like that, if you're not actually producing enough on your property and you have to get it from somewhere else, the price can fluctuate a lot, the availability can fluctuate a lot, even during regular times. But if things become more and more desperate, or if travel is kind of banned or restricted, or if, you know, gasoline is incredibly expensive, you're not always going to want to have to run out somewhere just to keep your animals alive. It's best to produce as much as you possibly can for animals like this on your own property. Another thing, a lot of people have a lot of shots they give their animals. A lot of people have a lot of dewormers or anti-parasitics and stuff like that. That's another thing that it only has a certain shelf life a lot of times, but you're going to want to have a supply on hand, and maybe even switch to some breeds that don't need as much of it or any of it. We don't really do much at all when it comes to different things we'd pick up at the vet. We use a lot of natural things, and we're going to continue doing that, and then we also have some hardier breeds to begin with. But let's say that every 3 months your sheep or goats are used to getting a certain dewormer, a certain, you know, anti-parasitic. Well, what happens if you've got to take a year off? Well, if they're used to having that, it's normally because there's a presence of something in your area that is or could be affecting them, and then without it, they're all going to be susceptible to it. And they're going to begin to get weak, their whole system's going to get messed up, they're going to begin to die on you. And as they do, you know, they're going to become an incubation source for the next generation of things that are going to attack your flock. So everywhere they poop, there's going to be eggs. Everywhere that they're grazing, they're going to eat, you know, the next ones are going to eat them up, and that's going to be a bad kind of cycle that keeps repeating itself until you don't have any left. Again, I'm going to say, have a ram or two. We actually have one little eater ram that we have with the female still. These are our 4 here. That's Dodge, he's the current herd sire. And then here, this is Ezekiel. He is next in line. So Dodge will eat here in a bit. Zeke will let take over. And then Thunderkill, the smaller sheared one right here, he's going to be an eater too. And Jacob at the moment, who's butting heads with the other one, he's going to be, you know, another eater too. But I'm going to have 2. If I eat Dodge and Thunderkill, then Jacob's going to hang out for a while longer with Zeke, just to make sure I've got a big beefy male with some decent genetics who's ready to do the job if I need him to step up. If I don't have rams, I don't have, you know, ewes getting pregnant. Yes, I could order some little straws full of ram juice, if you will, to artificially inseminate all the females. But if that's the way that I do things, again, supply chain could be cut off pretty easily for that. So I want to have something on hand. And again, this is much easier to let them. They want to do the job. I don't necessarily want to try to make my, you know, sheep pregnant. These guys, that's their job. I don't need to order straws of ram juice on the internet. And again, if I have 2, that way if I lose one, I've got one there. Also, make sure you've got some that can do pretty good birthing. I really hope that some of the videos that people put out on YouTube about,
oh, our goat's ultrasound, what's it gonna be? How many do they have?
I really hope that's just people who are making enough off of their YouTube channels that they just do weird things people don't normally do. I really do. Because I couldn't see taking a bunch of my sheep to go get an ultrasound and all that stuff. It just, you know, they're either gonna have babies or they're not. They're either pregnant or they're not. Either the babies are gonna live or they don't. They're either gonna throw 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be. But I'll tell when they birth. I don't need to be spending money on that. I don't need an extra trip to the vet. But if you are someone who can't possibly have your you or your doe give birth without first getting an ultrasound, careful. You know, that's my only word of advice, careful. And I will add in that one reason I like things like this, right, Jacob? Come here, buddy. Can you come here? Come here. One reason I like things like this is they're a good size, that it's easy for me to process. I can lift one of these animals when it's dead, okay? Especially if I've got a pulley or something. It's not that difficult. Jacob, come here. Come say hi. No? You're okay, buddy. I can't do that with a cow. When we took care of our cow now, Xenia, I harvested, if you will, her mom. We used a tractor to lift that up, you know. If we have access to a tractor and access to diesel, that works okay. But if we didn't, you know, I've got to quarter that thing on the ground and lift big portions of it. If I'm eating these off the hoof, number one, I only have a certain amount of meat to deal with. Because that's one thing too, if things get really bad, you're gonna wanna be taking care of your own stuff. You're gonna wanna learn to butcher now that you're not clueless. The second that you've gotta eat your own animal and you can no longer take it to the butcher. So I know how to get in here. I know how to get the meat out. I know how not to contaminate the meat. I know how to deal with it. A lot of it, you know, we can right now, and we could probably can over a fire. I know some people who do, you know, using wood as the fuel to do their pressure canning. I know how to make some jerky. I can put that, once it's dry, in a jar and have it last quite a while on the shelf. The reason it doesn't last is because it's so delicious. You know, I can smoke some meat, and I'm learning more about that stuff. I have refrigerator stable salami right now. I want to get shelf stable where I can just wrap it up and let it sit in a cupboard or in a root cellar or something like that and still be edible. But even if it's not, you know, this is an amount that we can eat, and when we eat it, we don't have hundreds of pounds of extra meat to store like we would with a cow. That's one reason I like these smaller sized animals as opposed to that. And plus, if you know, if I lost a whole cow, that's a pretty big financial hit. There's quite a replacement value that's going to need to be invested that's substantial. If I lose a sheep here or there, it's not, you know, the end of the world. It's not that, doesn't hit me that hard in the wallet. So I like this size animal. But let's talk about cows for a minute. So here we go with cow, and since I have a pony here, I'm also going to talk about horses a little bit. But with your larger animals, and I don't entirely consider a horse necessarily to be a homestead animal, in the fact that it doesn't give me meat or eggs or you know, milk, but it is a homestead animal in the way that a dog is. You know, a dog is going to be on your property for protection, usually protecting you, protecting the other animals, or as an alarm system. Well, a horse or a pony, you can get plows that they can pull. You can get horse-drawn carriages. There's different you know, gardening work or farming work that they can do. Even people used to use them to put the hay up in the hay barns. You know, they would be the ones pulling and lifting that so that you didn't have to. And then also I know some people who are trying to get into some of that stuff for transportation. Just because if they don't have too far to go and some things kind of get disrupted a little more, they may want to get somewhere in the type of speed a horse could get them there than what they would have to do themselves. And of course it's easier if an animal does the work for you, even if it's just walking. And then of course people use them, you know, pack mules, other things, and donkeys can be, you know, guardian animals too. But with cows, you know, a lot of people do a lot of shots for their cows. A lot of people do a lot of medicated stuff for their cows, or a lot of, you know, anti-parasitics. Again, if you do not have a supply on hand and things get disrupted, boy, your entire, you know, herd could just be gone. And that would be absolute devastation. if that's something that they actually need to live. And in some cases, it can be that type of thing. We like a natural immunity as much as we can with our animals, because if they're dependent upon those shots, it actually, in a lot of cases, makes them on their own less capable of dealing with the things they're exposed to in their environment. And then if those are the ones having the offspring, then their offspring are just as incapable or potentially more. Where if you have ones with a good natural immunity and they're the ones who are breeding, then they're having the offspring that are going to fall into line and be similar. Also, again, if you're not making your own hay and stuff, and I know some people who want to be cutting all their own hay with those and having those pull the wagons, the trailers to pick them all up and stuff like that, so they're not dependent upon the farm equipment to do it. You can also take some different hand tools and make a good amount of hay as well. But if you do not have enough hay or feed on hand to have these make it through the winter, if you're not generating that from your own property and it becomes all of a sudden harder to get some of that stuff, your first winter, you might lose the vast majority, of your animals. That's dangerous, especially when you consider the size, because that's a big body to try to get rid of, or the expense, because that's a hard hit to the wallet, of cows. The other part that I really like to mention about cows, as I did with the sheep, is they're a whole different beast, just because of the size and the weight to butcher. And then you have a giant amount of meat that you have to deal with. If you don't have a meat locker, or if your meat locker, your big freezer, your cooler is kind of shut down due to a lack of power, or you're going to hang that meat. You can do it seasonally. I'll give you that. You can do it seasonally, where if you're harvesting it in winter and you have a pretty consistent temp where it's not freezing thawing, freezing thawing. Yeah, I've let deer hang for more than a week, I think, before. It's okay. If your temperature is appropriate with it. But if the temperature is fluctuating too much or you're in a different season, you're just going to have a lot of spoiling meat. And, each time you harvest one of these, that's a lot to work your way through before you get to harvest the next one. So again, part of it is you may have to be extremely DIY, where all of your butchering and your processing and your storing, your food preservation falls on your shoulders, where you're not able to hang it at some meat locker at the butcher's, for a week or two and then get it all packaged up. You may have to do that all yourself. So I just highly recommend get a frame of reference for what you're getting into. In all of this, get a frame of reference, have some experience up front, that you're not clueless the second all these things happen. Again, the more you're able to generate from your own property, the better. Have an amount of animals that can make sense for your property. That makes sense too. We're going to have to reduce some sheep this spring because of how decimated our pastures became over our inexperience with homesteading. And while we build those back up, we're going to want less animals on them. As they get built up and they're able to, we're going to be able to have more. But until that happens, we still have too many sheep. And every year, the flock doubles, because they give birth. There's nothing wrong with that. That gives us a good opportunity to bless others, to sell some, to eat more, whatever it may be. But if we keep them all, we're going to work ourselves into some serious problems. So whatever it is, from quail through chickens, guineas, ducks, turkeys, sheep, goats, cows, be careful out there. Don't get locked into something that is just the way that people do things now because it's easy to do the way that things are now. Things have been changing. They may continue to change, and there's people who really, really want it to change, and they got a lot more pull and a lot more say than you do. There's a reason why people are buying up farmland. There's a reason why all sorts of stuff is happening. If I grow my own food myself or raise my own food myself, I know what's in there. There's a lot of things. Read the label. Even when you can pronounce the words of what's in there, you still don't know what's in there. And that's just what they're telling you. You know what I mean? I just want to avoid a foolish death. If I have a foolish, avoidable death, I'd rather do that. Let's do that. I want to live a good, healthy life. I don't want to be in constant pain for 30 years and then die. If I can avoid that, why not? I want my children to be able to have trustworthy fuel going into their little machines. That's important. And I don't want a couple bad things to happen and then all of a sudden we have no more animals on our homestead, and everything we get, we've got to go to somebody else to get, because especially the bigger the places that they're coming from, it's a little easier to trust that the farmer up the road is doing things to keep his animals alive and raising them in a way than a giant factory or something like that, or some giant processing plant. Giant processing plant, boy, sometimes there's a lot of preservatives, other things getting added to it. The guy up the street just ain't doing. So I mention these things, guys, because I think they're important. I hope nothing ever gets disrupted. I hope you're always able to buy and sell. I hope you're always able to freely travel around. It's not true everywhere right now. I hope you're always able to go get good, healthy food at the store for a reasonable price. But some of that's already falling apart, isn't it? So if that's the case, just be aware of it and do a couple things ahead of time. Like I said, start trying to reproduce your own animals. Start trying to raise the next generation on your own. Start trying to process them on your own. Some of my very small children could do the entire thing. I could just toss them a couple chickens and be like, hey, bring them in, as soon as you're done. And they'd show up, in a half hour with a tray full of, meat ready to go in the oven. They can do that. Can you? I hope so. You should be able to. And again, give them things that they can eat that don't come from the store. When you're able to, and have animals that are able to, feed them something natural. And the more that you're able to do that, the better off they're going to be, and the better off it is for you to have their milk, or their eggs, or their meat. I'll see you next time. Hopefully it was helpful. If there's stuff I left out, please leave a comment. Let others know. If people are curious, they can head down there and figure that out. But that's just where I'm at on some of this stuff. I'll see you next time. Papa out.